I never thought a torn sleeve would change my life, but that's exactly what happened on the third night of our camping trip when Dashiell leaned in close with a needle and thread, and I realized I'd been lying to myself for months. Let me back up. I'm Connor, 25, marketing analyst, absolutely terrible at anything requiring manual skills, which is probably why I agreed to go on this wilderness camping trip in the first place. Some misguided idea that I needed to prove I could be outdoorsy and capable. My friend group had been planning it for weeks, and I'd nodded along enthusiastically while privately Googling how to not die while camping. Dashiell was part of that friend group, though calling him just a friend had started feeling incomplete somewhere around month 3 of knowing him. He joined our weekly trivia team back in January, this quiet guy with dark curly hair that fell into his eyes and an unexpected laugh that made everyone else laugh too. He worked as a librarian, which somehow fit him perfectly. I'd catch myself watching him across the table at the bar, the way his long fingers wrapped around his beer glass, how he'd bite his lower lip when he was thinking hard about an answer. I told myself it was admiration. He was cool in this understated way I'd never managed to be. That's all it was. The camping trip was supposed to be 8 of us, but cancellations happened, and by the time we actually drove out to the state park, it was just 4. Me, Dashiell, and 2 others who'd paired up to share the larger tent, which left Dashiell and me sharing the smaller 2-person tent, and I'd spent the entire 3-hour drive trying to act normal about it while my brain spiraled through increasingly anxious scenarios about personal space and morning breath and what if I talked in my sleep. The first 2 days were fine. Better than fine, actually. Dashiell knew what he was doing outdoors in a way that wasn't showy, just competent. He showed me how to properly stake down tent corners, how to hang our food so bears wouldn't get interested, how to build a fire that actually stayed lit. I felt like a kid being taught basic life skills, but he never made me feel stupid about it. He'd just demonstrate something once, then hand me the tools and say, "Your turn," with this small, encouraging smile. We fell into an easy rhythm. I'd attempt things. He'd gently correct my form. We'd laugh when I inevitably messed up. Our other friends would wander off to explore or take photos, and Dashiell and I would end up sitting by the fire, talking about nothing important. His favorite books, my disastrous attempt to learn guitar last year, whether hot dogs tasted better cooked over a fire or if we were all just lying to ourselves about that. I noticed things about him I hadn't before. The way he'd push his hair back when he was concentrating. How he always offered me the better camping chair without commenting on it. The careful way he'd navigate around me in the small tent, hyper-aware of not invading my space. That last one made something twist in my chest that I refused to examine. On the 3rd night, we decided to hike to a ridge about 2 miles from camp to watch the sunset. The 4 of us made the trek up, and it was worth it. The sky turned these impossible shades of orange and pink and purple, and for a few minutes none of us said anything, just stood there watching. Dashiell was standing next to me, close enough that our shoulders almost touched, and I found myself hyper-aware of that almost distance between us. On the way back down, the trail got rockier, and the light was fading fast. I was watching my feet, trying not to trip, when a branch I didn't see caught my sleeve and ripped a clean tear from my shoulder to my elbow. The sound of fabric tearing was surprisingly loud in the quiet woods. "Damn it," I muttered, examining the damage. It was my favorite flannel shirt, worn soft from years of use. The tear was long and jagged. Dashiell stopped and looked back. "Let me see." I held out my arm, and he ran his fingers along the edge of the tear, assessing it with the same careful attention he gave everything. His touch was light but deliberate, and I felt it way more than I should have. Just fingers on fabric. "Nothing. I can fix this," he said. "When we get back to camp." "It's okay. It's just a shirt." "It's your favorite shirt. I've seen you wear it like 3 times a week." He said it matter-of-factly, like he hadn't just revealed that he'd been paying attention to what I wore. Something warm spread through my chest. "You noticed that?" He glanced at me, then away quickly. "Come on, it's getting dark." Back at camp, after we'd eaten the slightly burned foil packet dinners I'd attempted to cook, Dashiell disappeared into our tent and emerged with a small sewing kit. Of course, he had brought a sewing kit camping. Of course he had. Our other friends had already retreated to their tent, tired from the hike. The fire was burning low, casting moving shadows across everything. Dashiell gestured to the log we'd been using as a bench. "Sit, take off the shirt." My brain short-circuited for a second. "What?" "I can't sew it while you're wearing it." "Well, I could, but I'd probably stab you." He was already threading a needle, squinting in the firelight. Right, obviously. I pulled off the flannel, leaving me in just my t-shirt, and the night air was cold enough that I shivered. I handed him the shirt and he examined the tear more closely, turning it in his hands. "This is going to take a few minutes. The tear's pretty long." He looked up at me. "You're going to freeze. Come here." He patted the space right next to him on the log, closer than we'd been sitting before. I sat, and he surprised me by draping the torn shirt over both our laps like a blanket, the undamaged parts covering our legs. Body heat," he explained, then bent over the sleeve and started working. I watched him sew. His face was maybe 8 inches from my bare arm where he'd positioned the sleeve, and I could feel his breath against my skin when he exhaled. Warm little puffs of air that made the hair on my arm stand up. He worked slowly, carefully, making small, neat stitches that pulled the fabric back together. "Where'd you learn to sew?" I asked, because I needed to say something, needed to distract myself from the fact that every nerve in my arm felt alive and hyper-aware. "My mom taught me. She said everyone should know how to mend their own clothes." He didn't look up, stayed focused on the work. I used to think it was boring, but there's something meditative about it now. Just the repetitive motion, watching something broken become whole again. His voice was soft, almost dreamy. I'd never heard him talk quite like that before. "That's kind of beautiful," I said, and meant it. He glanced up at me then, just for a second, and in the firelight, his eyes looked darker than usual. "Yeah?" "Yeah." He went back to sewing, and I went back to watching him. The concentration on his face, the way his lips pressed together slightly when he was making a particularly tricky stitch. A curl of hair had fallen forward, and I had the sudden, overwhelming urge to reach out and brush it back. I didn't. I sat very still and tried to breathe normally. "You're good at taking care of things," I said. "People. Whatever needs taking care of. Someone has to be." He tied off a stitch, started another section. "You're good at other things." "Like what? Burning dinner and nearly falling on every hike." "Like making people feel comfortable. Making them laugh. You notice when someone's feeling left out and you pull them into the conversation." He still wasn't looking at me, kept his eyes on his work. "That's not a small thing, Connor." The way he said my name made my stomach flip. I'd heard him say it dozens of times before, but something was different now, or maybe I was finally letting myself hear the difference. "Dashiell," I started, then stopped because I didn't know what I was going to say. "Yeah?" He glanced up, and his face was so close to my arm, to me, and the firelight was catching in his eyes and on his lips, and I suddenly understood with perfect clarity that I'd been fooling myself for months. This wasn't admiration. This wasn't friendship. This was the feeling that made my chest tight when he smiled at me, that made me look for him first when I walked into a room, that made me memorize stupid details like how he drank his coffee and what books he was reading. "Nothing," I said, but my voice came out wrong, too rough, too honest. He looked at me for a long moment, needles suspended in midair, and something passed between us in the silence. A question. A possibility. Then he cleared his throat and went back to sewing. "Almost done," he murmured. I watched his hands work, watched the tear gradually disappear under his careful stitches, and thought about things being broken and becoming whole again. Thought about how sometimes you don't realize something's been torn until someone shows you how to fix it. He tied off the final stitch and bit the thread to break it, then held up the sleeve to examine his work. The repair was visible if you looked closely, a line of stitches tracking up the fabric, but it was neat and strong. There. Good as new. Well, good as old. He handed me the shirt, and when I took it, our fingers brushed. Neither of us pulled away immediately. "Thank you," I said. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to." He was still holding the other end of the shirt, so we were connected by it, this repaired thing between us. "Connor, Dashiell." We both stopped. Both laughed nervously. "You go," he said. I pulled on the shirt, buying myself time to figure out what I was going to say. The fabric was still warm from being draped across our laps, and I could see his stitches running up my sleeve, this tangible evidence of his care. "I've been lying to myself," I said finally, "about what I feel, about you." He went very still. "What do you feel?" "Terrified, mostly." I forced myself to look at him. "Because you're my friend and I don't want to mess that up, but also like I'm going to explode if I don't tell you that I think about you constantly. That I volunteered for this camping trip because I knew you'd be here. That every time you touch me, even accidentally, I feel it for hours afterward." The words came out in a rush, and as soon as they were out, I wanted to take them back and also never wanted to stop talking. Dashiell was staring at me with an expression I couldn't read. "Say something," I said. "Please say something." "How long?" His voice was barely above a whisper. "I don't know. Months?" I kept telling myself it was nothing, that I was reading things wrong, that you'd never... I stopped. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said anything. We still have 2 more days of sharing a tent, and I've made this so weird." "Connor." He reached out and caught my hand, laced his fingers through mine. His palm was warm and slightly calloused and fit against mine like it had always belonged there. "I brought a sewing kit on a camping trip. I noticed your favorite shirt. I've been finding excuses to be near you for months." My heart was doing something complicated in my chest. "You have? I thought I was being obvious. I thought you knew and were just being kind about it." He laughed, but it sounded shaky. "I've been working up the courage to say something this whole trip." "Really? Really?" He squeezed my hand. "Why do you think I offered to share a tent? Our other friends didn't cancel at the last minute. I asked them to take the other tent. I wanted time with just you." I stared at him. "You planned this?" "Not the torn sleeve part. That was just lucky." He smiled, and it was different from his usual smile. More open, more vulnerable. "I've wanted to tell you for so long, I just kept chickening out. You? You're the bravest person I know." "Not about this." He looked down at our joined hands. "Not about you. You matter too much." Something in my chest cracked open, and before I could second-guess myself, I leaned in and kissed him. Just a soft press of lips, tentative and questioning. He made a small, surprised sound, then kissed me back, his free hand coming up to cup my jaw. It was gentle and careful, and absolutely nothing like I'd imagined, and also exactly like I'd imagined. He tasted like the chocolate we'd had for dessert and smoke from the fire. When we pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine. "I've wanted to do that for so long," he whispered. "Me too. I just didn't let myself want it. And now I can't think about anything else." He smiled against my lips, and we kissed again, longer this time, deeper. His hand slid into my hair, and I gripped his shirt, and the fire crackled beside us, and nothing had ever felt more right. When we finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, he laughed softly. "We should probably go to bed. Early hike tomorrow. Right, bed, in our shared tent. Together. Is that going to be weird now? I looked at him, at his kiss-swollen lips and messy hair and the happiness in his eyes. I don't think anything with you could be weird. We banked the fire and brushed our teeth and climbed into the tent, and when we were both in our sleeping bags, Dashiell reached across the small space between us and found my hand in the darkness. "Hey, Connor." "Yeah? I'm really glad you tore your shirt." I laughed. "Me too." We fell asleep holding hands, and when I woke up in the middle of the night, I could hear his steady breathing beside me and feel the warmth of him in the small space. I looked at the tent ceiling and thought about how sometimes the things we're most afraid of wanting are the things we need most. The next morning, our friends definitely noticed something had changed. We weren't exactly subtle about it, the way we kept gravitating toward each other, the way Dashiell would touch the small of my back when he passed behind me, the way I'd lean into him without thinking about it. Finally, one of them said over breakfast, "We were wondering how long you two were going to dance around each other." "You knew?" I asked. "Everyone knew. You both look at each other like the other person hung the moon." She grinned. It was actually kind of painful to watch. Very rom-com level oblivious. Dashiell and I looked at each other and laughed. All that time spent worrying, and apparently it had been obvious to everyone but us. The last day of the trip was my favorite. We hiked to a waterfall, and Dashiell held my hand the whole way, only letting go when the trail got too narrow. We took photos together, his arm around my waist, my head on his shoulder. We shared a sleeping bag that night, and I fell asleep with his arms around me, feeling safer and more myself than I had in years. On the drive home, he held my hand across the center console, and we made plans. Dinner next week, a movie, meeting up at the library where he worked so he could show me his favorite section. Normal things that felt extraordinary, because they were with him. "I'm glad you're bad at camping," he said as we pulled into the city. "Why?" "Because otherwise I never would have had an excuse to teach you things, to spend time with you." He brought my hand to his lips and kissed my knuckles. "To fix your shirt." I looked at my sleeve, at the line of neat stitches holding the tear together. It wasn't invisible. You could see where it had been broken. But that was okay. Some repairs were meant to show, meant to be a reminder of the moment everything changed. "Best repair job ever," I said. "Just wait until I show you my other skills." "Oh yeah? Like what?" He grinned. "I make excellent pancakes, and I'm very good at cuddling, and I give the best book recommendations." That's quite a resume. "I'm a catch." "You really are." I squeezed his hand. "I can't believe I almost didn't come on this trip." "But you did." I did. He pulled up in front of my apartment and killed the engine, but neither of us moved to get out. The street was quiet, afternoon sun filtering through the windshield. "Connor," he said softly, "this is real, right? This isn't just a camping trip thing. This is the realest thing I've ever felt." I turned to face him fully. "I want this. I want you. Not just for a weekend in the woods, but for all of it. The boring everyday stuff and the adventures and everything in between." His smile was bright enough to rival the sun. "Good. Because I'm not letting you go. You're stuck with me now. Promise?" "Promise." He kissed me there in his car in broad daylight, and I kissed him back, and I thought about all the months I'd wasted being afraid. But maybe that was okay too. Maybe some things are worth the wait, worth the fear, worth the risk of reaching out across the distance and hoping someone reaches back. We eventually got out of the car, and he helped me carry my gear up to my apartment, and when we got to my door, he kissed me goodbye like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like he'd been doing it forever. Like he'd keep doing it forever. "See you tomorrow?" he asked. "You couldn't keep me away." After he left, I unpacked my camping gear and hung up my flannel shirt. In the bathroom mirror, I could see the repaired sleeve, the careful stitches tracking up the fabric. I thought about Dashiell's hands working in the firelight, his breath warm against my skin, the moment I'd finally let myself admit the truth. Sometimes things have to break before they can be properly fixed. Sometimes you have to tear something open to see what's really underneath. And sometimes the person who knows how to mend you has been standing right there all along, just waiting for you to notice. I touched the stitches on my sleeve and smiled. I noticed now. I finally noticed, and I was never going to stop noticing, not for as long as he'd let me.